Moi palden save lama rinpoche dagi chiwa pende den shula kaden jempa gone jesunde kuson tuji ngadu sadu so ning to jempa payo len mantra Lodra Champa Chako Denisik Drupa Champa Chamdra Chiyantan Losa Champa Shabla Solvandev Nutu Champa Kunda Zeneche Kaje Champa Lama Nepase Sandra Chamber Drupe Jasenso Lepa Chamber Shabla Solvande Tekpa Chamber Rekcho Yonsuse Shaja Chamber Topang Undurjur Tenle Chamber Kadanyam Padal Nigom Champa Shabla Solvande Tampa Namla Gupe Satabju Drukju Tensen Chonab Shabtensing Tempa Rinchen Chojo Chepadang Chik Tengele Champa Chapa Sho Jewa Kuntu Yanda Lamadang Trame Juji Pala Long Chuching Sadang Lam Chi Yanten Rab Sone Doje Changik Su Nyoto Sho Sanje Chudang Soji Chonam La Shanjo Badu Dane Chab Soji Dagi Jin Soji Be Sunam Ji Dola Penje Sanje Drupa Sho Sanje Chudang Soji Chonam La Shanjo Badu Dane Chab Soji Dagi Jin Soji Be Sunam Ji Dola Penje Sanje Drupa Sho Sanje Chudang Chonam La Shanjo Badu Dane Chab Soji Dagi Jin Soji Be Sunam Ji Dola Penje Sanje Drupa Sho Semchen Tamje Deva Dang Deve Judan Dempa Jujik Dunga Dan Dunga Ji Judan Delwa Jujik Dunga Mepe Deva Dampa Dan Mindelwa Jujik Nyering Chadan Dan Delve Tonyom Chempola Nepa Jujik Semchen Tamje Deva Dang Deve Judan Dempa Jujik Dunga Dan Dunga Ji Judan Delwa Jujik Dunga Mepe Deva Dampa Dang Mindelwa Jujik Nyering Chadan Dan Delve Tonyom Chempola Nepa Jujik Semchen Tamje Deva Dang Deve Judan Dempa Dunga Dan Dunga Ji Judan Delwa Jujik Dunga Mepe Deva Dampa Dan Mindelwa Jujik Nyering Chadan Dan Delve Tonyom Chempola Nepa Jujik Hoi Chasa Wadang Chujing Shakpadang Jesu Yerang Kushin Solvaye Kewa Junse Dagi Chisapa Tamje Dagi Chanju Chingo. So welcome to everybody here and online as well, and we will continue from last time, and so please remember Bodhichitta. This course is all about the Bodhichitta and the 6 perfections. Maybe we will only manage 4, that's possible. So we must try and focus on that, and we'll continue. Like have that motivation also when you study, like now, to try and remember Bodhicitta, why we're doing it. That's why we chant the prayer. So we looked at that last time. I want to just sort of summarize what we did last time, okay, to refresh your memory. What we looked at, of course, the importance of Bodhicitta when we listen to teachings and how to listen to teachings, how not to listen to teachings and how to listen to teachings. So not to be distracted outwardly, not to be distracted inwardly, not to be a sieve where everything falls through the holes, not to be upside down. All these examples that are quite common, and also quite common in our own mind. If we are honest about it, we are quite distracted a lot of the time. So it's a time to try and just to focus. So we looked at that, and we looked at the life of Shantideva and how the text came about. Just refreshing, you remember how he was a lazy layabout, seemingly, and how his other monks tried to get him to leave the monastery, and he then impressed everybody by spontaneously reciting this text, the way of the Bodhisattva. And so it was clear he was someone, he was not an ordinary being. So then we looked at the classification of bodhicitta, the relative and ultimate bodhicitta. And we looked at the aims of bodhicitta, looking at how through compassion it focuses on the welfare of others, and through wisdom it focuses on enlightenment. And that these two together joined are what we mean when we say bodhicitta. Bodhicitta is not only compassion, because compassion without wisdom could become a real problem. Sometimes it is a problem. What Trungpa Rinpoche used to call idiot compassion. We could have, compassion without knowing what we're doing could be problematic. They have to go together, and you remember that example of how the wisdom has to be the driver. Wisdom is very important in everything we do. Or you could say just like intelligent awareness. Wisdom is a very big word, but having that sense of, we know the landscape to some degree, and we know where we're going. We can see the road, and we know what the consequences are. So we looked at that, the aims of bodhicitta is the welfare of others, and then focusing on one's own enlightenment in order to work for the benefit of others. And we looked at then at how to, we didn't do that yet. We looked at how in the teachings is taught that all the activities of a bodhisattva are contained within the 6 perfections, and this is what this text covers. It covers then the importance of bodhicitta, and then how do we develop it? How do we do it? We can know everything about it, we can have all the words, we can have all the ideas, but how do we train and actually make it grow and make it develop? And that's through these 6 perfections. So I gave you a little overview of the 6 perfections. Then we went into the actual text, the first verses of how it was, all the parts, the first verses of it, and the benefits of developing bodhicitta, and how we should not let go of it once we have even just a tiny bit of recognition of the importance of it. We should really hang on to that, because this is what can pull us out of samsara. You remember the example of the cow, holding onto the tail of the cow. That will bring us in the night time. We bump into the cow, we can't see a thing, but we know that the cow will find its way home. It's like pulling us out of samsara. It's an image that means if we just hold on to bodhicitta for dear life, we'll be okay, because we'll get home eventually. We will free ourselves from suffering. We'll be pulled out of the 6 realms of suffering. That's what that image means. So in a way that tells us how important that is. It's a major, important aspect of the Dharma teachings. And we mentioned these 3 fierce mantras, like this is it, this is what we've got to do. Yeah, I don't need anything, everything is enough, etc. So I think that's where we left it last time. So today what we're going to look at is continue just briefly with the benefits of bodhicitta, which is shown through some analogies, some examples. And then we're going to go into the first of the 6 perfections, as generosity. So how to train in bodhicitta through the application of generosity. Like what is right generosity, what is wrong generosity. How do we create all the causes, the right causes and conditions for merit and bodhicitta to arise. That's what we're looking at today. Okay? So, the examples. So, this is where the analogies, this is where I'm going to read to you from the text, because there's these examples in the way of the Bodhisattva. It's verse 10. It says, like the supreme substance of the alchemists, it takes our ordinary flesh and makes of it the body of a Buddha, a priceless jewel. Such is bodhicitta. Let us grasp it firmly. So the following verses are examples of the benefit, like the benefit of bodhicitta shown through examples. So a few different, I'll just go through a few of them. So it shows us the importance of bodhicitta as the mindset that can basically transform our life, which can really, it's like the flip of a coin, and our mindset that is so used to thinking about our own benefit on a day-to-day basis, it's basically about me. We are changing through bodhicitta. It's about thinking of others, thinking of the welfare of others. So it's an antidote to self-obsession, to grasping, to ego clinging. It's like getting medicine. Say, we are sick because I am suffering, I'm having such a hard time, I have pain here, pain here, pain here. What's the medicine I can take? My pain is caused by all this obsession with myself and my own situation and my own needs and my own desire, my own clinging and my own grasping. I mean, of course I'm putting it very, very strongly. It's not like we are so constantly caught up in grasping and desire, but there are so many different layers of it when we look at our mind state. Sometimes we have difficult days, sometimes we have easier days, and you have to think of it in terms of the 6 realms, and remember that human realm is a desire realm. Human realm is the realm of constant searching and looking for something better than what we have right now, for something more than what we have right now, for something else. Everybody else has something much better than me, or everybody else has something more than me. I am left out, I don't have enough, I'm not really able to satisfy myself. This is the desire realm. And sometimes it's strong and sometimes it's less strong to varying degrees. So the bodhicitta, the mindset of bodhicitta is the opposite. It's thinking about others rather than thinking about myself and my own needs. And it said this is the medicine that frees us from suffering, frees us from samsara. Hold on to that tail because it will pull you out of that slippery mud we're in. Think of others. All the texts tell us that, but it's very difficult when we're in the middle of it, isn't it? If we are in a mood, if we're feeling down, if we have obstacles, do something for others. Actually, the remedy is that in the Tonglen teachings. Do you remember the 7 points of mind training? What does it say? Or what are we doing when we are training in the 7 points of mind training? We are taking on the suffering of others with the in-breath and sending out goodness and happiness. This is it. This is Bodhichitta, training in Bodhichitta to overcome grasping and ego clinging. So this example of the example that Shantideva gives here is the example of alchemy, the transformation. Like alchemy, I don't know if that actually exists the way we tend to think of it as, iron transformed into gold. So some wealth, something useless transformed into something very, valuable. It's that idea of alchemy. But it's kind of magical, isn't it? But it's also maybe in chemistry and maybe in science there's some degree of that. And even in small ways we can say, if you look at how we transform, it's maybe not exactly the right example, but if you transform, you add a little bit of lemon juice to milk, it becomes yogurt. Or if you churn milk, it becomes butter. So it's like the essence is brought out of that thing we are churning. So it's maybe not exactly the same as transforming iron into gold, because iron doesn't have any gold in it. But there's some kind of transformative process happening. And this is what Shantideva compares Bodhicitta. He says, Bodhicitta is like the substance of the alchemists. If we can develop bodhicitta, if we can care for others, if we can just even a little bit, turn our mind away from thinking about our own situation and our own issues and our own sort of whatever's going on, try and do something for others. This is the process of alchemy. This is how we transform, he says, the ordinary flesh of our body and makes it into the body of a Buddha, which is like a priceless jewel. So bodhicitta transforms our ordinary body into a Buddha's body, right? If we really perfect bodhicitta to become ultimate bodhicitta, we become a Buddha. Our body becomes a Buddha's body with all the marks and signs. But on a basic level, we have to think that, we're not Buddhas yet, but we can slowly make that transformation of giving up our selfish attitudes, which we know actually doesn't do us any good, actually causes us a lot of distress, and think more about others as a step in the right direction. And then these great qualities arrive. So the first example is of alchemy. And then the second example is with verse 11. He says, since the boundless wisdom of the only guide of beings, the Buddha, perfectly examined and perceived its priceless worth, this jewel of bodhicitta, those who wish to leave this state of wandering should hold well to this precious bodhicitta. So this is comparing bodhicitta to a jewel, showing, so the first example shows how bodhicitta leads to Buddhahood, from an ordinary body to a body of a Buddha, transforms through alchemy, like sort of a process of transformation. And this second example of a jewel shows how valuable it is, how precious it is. So comparing the mindset. Now we are continuously talking about this mindset of turning our mind around to think more of others than of ourselves. And here he says, Shantideva says that he compares the Buddha to a jeweler. So the bodhicitta is like a jewel, a priceless jewel, and the Buddha is like a jeweler, someone who has a lot of knowledge about gems. You know, if you are in Sri Lanka or places like that where they have lots of gems, you go into a shop and they look at them through a magnifying glass and they know exactly, is it a real one, is it a fake one? They can tell the color, is it a good quality, good color, does it have flaws, etc. So saying, just like that, the Buddha has examined all the teachings. The Buddha has reflected, has found the causes of suffering, has found the causes of happiness. Through this examination with his magnifying glass and his own mind, he found the causes of suffering. He found how to be free from suffering. So in that sense, the Buddha is compared to an expert in gems, an expert in jewels. He's able to know the quality of a jewel and know when it's very, very precious. So he's found that bodhicitta is as precious as a wish-fulfilling jewel. It's compared here to a wish-fulfilling jewel. So he says that, Shantideva says that if we wish to really change our mind, if we wish to really become the best possible version of ourselves, meaning being free from neurosis, being free from fear, being free from anxiety, being free from all the cliches of attachment and aversion and ignorance. That is the best version of ourselves, right? We have all the qualities arise. Then he says, if that's what we want, he says, those who wish to leave the state of wandering, that's what it's saying, we should really develop this bodhicitta. We should hold well to this precious bodhicitta. And we should use the same qualities that the Buddha did. We should use this magnifying glass and examine and be careful. So developing carefulness, vigilance, mindfulness, awareness, develop all the positive qualities, practice the 6 perfections. Then bodhicitta becomes like a wish-fulfilling jewel that will grant us all those qualities, meaning freedom from suffering, happiness, contentment, well-being. That is what bodhicitta, the ultimate bodhicitta, meaning Buddhahood, that's what this will bring. Obstacles and difficulties are dispelled. Not just like that, by some magic, but by our training and our application to the Dharma. Then it dispels obstacles, dispels problems, dispels suffering, and it grants our wishes because our mind is liberated and free from suffering. So that's the other example showing how precious it is, what a great value it has. Then the third example, verse 12, says, all other virtues, like the plantain tree, produce their fruit, but then their force is spent. Only the marvelous tree of bodhicitta constantly bears fruit and grows unceasingly. So this is an analogy or example of a fruit-bearing tree, and it talks about the fruition of bodhicitta, that where the outcome of developing bodhicitta is inexhaustible. If we really develop this, if we can grow this tree of bodhicitta, that's like a fruit-bearing tree. So he's saying we should not grow a plantain tree. So it says, all other virtues, like the plantain tree, produce their fruit, but then their force is spent. So the plantain tree is kind of like a banana tree, I think, isn't it? Like they're hollow inside. They grow, they produce fruit once, and then they die. They don't sort of continuously produce fruit. So he says that is the way of ordinary virtue, you could say, ordinary goodness. Ordinary goodness that doesn't have a vast motivation. And it doesn't have the qualities of what makes it into perfection. So if we're just doing good, we might be doing good. It's like it's the difference between generosity and the perfection of generosity. We might be doing good, but that's just a very little bit. But if we do good with all the qualities of the perfection of generosity, is much vaster. So he's saying like worldly benefit and worldly virtue for individual liberation. It's like a plantain tree where we have selfish motivation. Selfish motivation, our activities are based on me and what benefits me and what benefits those close to me, but not a vast motivation. It's very limited. So it's still good, there's still a benefit in that, but it's limited. Just like this plantain tree, it dies immediately after bearing fruit, and then it's like hollow inside. It's not a solid trunk of a tree. So he's saying that we should develop the bodhicitta we should develop the Mahayana motivation of bodhicitta, that we, compassion and wisdom. That's like this tree that bears fruit, that's inexhaustible. With that motivation. So if we practice with a Mahayana motivation compared to, say, we might practice and we might wish, through this practice I will get a good career, through this practice I will win the lottery, through this practice I might get a good mortgage, or maybe I will find a life partner, or whatever, I don't know what, but you see the difference, like in what we are aiming for is something very limited and worldly, compared to having a vast aim of saying, may I become, through this practice, may I become a great bodhisattva, may I become liberated, and eventually in future lives may I be able to be a benefit to others. Even if I cannot do it this life, I can do it in future lives. So that is the difference in having a great motivation. And it's said to be like a stream that runs into the ocean. It never gets exhausted. So then the last example that I'm going to give you is like a bodyguard. It says, Shantideva says, as if passing through dangers guarded by a hero or bodyguard, even those weighed down with terrible negativity will instantly be freed through having bodhicitta. Why do those who fear their harmful actions don't take recourse in it, have no recourse to it? So this is an example that shows how so the previous one showed how the virtue of bodhicitta is limitless, inexhaustible. This shows is an example to show that bodhicitta overcomes negative karma. It purifies negative karma. It purifies past negative actions. Because we've all made mistakes, we've all done things that we may regret. We've also done things that we don't even remember, that we don't know about in past lives. So if we think that if we're afraid of these consequences, then we can remember that bodhicitta is like a protection, like a bodyguard, like a hero that protects us when we go through difficulties, as it said, going through dangers. It's like we have our own personal bodyguard. We're passing through a narrow ravine. There might be boulders and rocks falling, but we have someone there who can look after us, like protection. You could think of Milarepa, for example, in this case. Think of the life story of Milarepa, how many people he had killed. He had killed about 35 people in his family when he came to the Dharma. Through his magic and his sorcery and his hailstorms and his mother's wish for revenge on his family, all his tragic childhood, he caused so much havoc and despair in his own family. by causing their house to collapse, that he had terrible karma. And when he realized, when he started to think about what he had done and thought about the consequences of this, he got very afraid and worried and started to look for help. He started to think, what can I do? I must purify, I must do something to counteract what I have done. This is terrible what I have done. I have killed 35 people, I've been the cause of their death. So he was initially afraid, and then he really, due to that, he totally dedicated himself to the Dharma. He practiced more diligently than anyone. He's such an example of how to be as a practitioner, isn't it? Milarepa is held up as an example in all the lineages of, if you want to be a good practitioner, look at Milarepa. He has total dedication. He had total faith and diligence and renunciation. And in great part due to what he had done. In great part due to his negative karma. And so he put so much effort into his Dharma practice that he had really great results. So you could say it almost became a blessing. Due to that, his drive was so strong and his commitment so powerful. But so then, yes, it says Bodhichitta will purify. Where's my page? So it says anyone who's weighed down with terrible negativity will instantly be freed through having bodhicitta. It purifies our harmful actions if we can really perfect bodhicitta. Maybe not just a little bit of compassion or a little bit of wisdom will not purify all our negative karma, but of course it's talking about the perfection of it. So it's said to be the best purification. And why? Why is it the best purification? Because it dispels our ignorance, it dispels our selfishness, dispels our grasping and clinging, attachment and aversion, all the kleshas that cause negative karma. And we would have, we've all made mistakes. Even if we think about from the time of birth until now, whether you are now vegetarian or not, how many animals from the time up until now have died for you to eat? Even as a vegetarian, we are a cause of suffering for animals. But if we, I think most of us, we grow up eating meat. At least here we're all vegetarian, but I know that not everybody is vegetarian. But if you eat meat, think of all these animals who have been killed. Like if we had to count and pile them all up in a big mountain from the time of your birth until now, how many animals would have died for us to satisfy our desire for meat? Our desire for what we like to eat, for what we want to eat. So that is not free of karma. All of our actions have consequences, and we have to recognize that even as vegetarians, animals are killed in us, and there are all sorts of consequences in us trying to fulfill our desires for having to have this, having to have that. There's so many needs that we think we have. But here it's saying that bodhicitta, it dissolves the root of suffering, which is ignorance and clinging to a self. And so if we want to be liberated and purified, we should practice bodhicitta to the very best of our ability. So that's the example. There's more, but we'll just do those. Then we go on. So the first part of this Shantideva's text of the way of the Bodhisattva, it covers this. What we go on to the second part now. So this first part shows us, it's trying to instill in us an awareness of the importance of this mindset. He's trying to tell us, look, this is the remedy. This is how you could become so rich and so wealthy and so, your life could be so full, like this alchemist. Your mind would be, there would be no more poverty mentality. There would be contentment. There would be total ease and happiness. So he's trying to instill in us the importance and why we need to train in developing bodhicitta. That's the first part. And the second part is about how do we develop it. Second and third part then continues. How do we develop it? Like not just knowing about it is not enough. We need to train in it. And then he goes in to talk about the perfection. So first being the generosity. And also he says that we need to create the causes and conditions. So how to develop this bodhicitta is by creating the causes and conditions. Things don't arise out of thin air. We tend to think, okay, things just happen, they come like that. We're not really very clear about what we're doing. We're sort of, that was just my good luck, my bad luck. We don't have the clarity of recognizing, what is positive, what is negative. He's telling us we need to create the causes and conditions for merit and for bodhicitta to arise. They arise with the right conditions, right causes and conditions. This creates karma, positive karma or negative karma. When Nagarjuna said, bodhicitta arises when the accumulation of merit is complete. So we need to create causes and conditions for merit, like positive causes and conditions. This is what these 6 perfections are about. It's like creating a fertile ground, not just having a harsh, stony field where nothing will grow, but creating a field that is really fertile and full of life and full of, you just have to, a little seed blows on the wind and lands there and it will flower and blossom. That's the field of accumulation of merit, like when right causes and conditions come together. And that is where teachings tell us that the best way to accumulate merit is to practice generosity. So the first of these 6 perfections. You remember last time we looked at the one, how the one perfection makes it easier for the next one, for the next one, for the next one, but they also go together. They are not like totally separate. But it's much easier to practice generosity than to engage with wisdom, isn't it? Much easier to practice generosity than even meditating. Properly meditating. Very focused, very concentrated. So they are coming in that order of what is easier. But so it said that this application of generosity is very, very important. When you look at how it works in the monasteries in India and in Tibet and in Asia, they are very familiar with this whole idea of making offerings. We are not in the West so familiar. For us it's like buying and selling. We're getting something in return. We are paying and we are getting something in return, and we think that's fair bargain. Our attitude to spirituality is a bit like that, whereas in Asia they're very much into like just offering as a way of practice. To demonstrate how important making offerings is, there's a story about Atisha who went to Tibet. So Atisha was from India to Tibet. He was sent to India at a time where he had a great influence on the Dharma in Tibet in terms of establishing foundations and a very good solid ground for the Dharma to grow, and in taking refuge in the four foundations and the four thoughts, and also Bodhichitta. And it's said that in one monastery at one time they requested him to give the Bodhisattva vow. And he said, yes, I will come and I will give you the Bodhisattva vow, but you should prepare the offerings, prepare the shrine and prepare everything that is needed and required and lay out all the offerings. And then they all did that, and he came back on the day and he said, no, I'm not giving the vow, this is not enough. And he left, and then they prepared more offerings, and he said, no, not enough. And it went on like that over several times, where he kept refusing to give the vow of bodhicitta because they did not fully, he saw that they did not fully value what the bodhisattva vow meant. And so that was why he kept pushing and saying, you need to make more offerings. And also they did not fully understand the importance of merit and the importance of generosity in creating merit and creating the right causes and conditions for bodhicitta to grow. Like to think that, well, we're just gonna ask for the vow, and then a teacher will give it to us, and then that's it. It's sort of like that's like a stony ground. It's like a field that has no fertile ground. Do you see the difference in the mindset? So he kept refusing in order to impress on them the importance of the preciousness of bodhicitta, the bodhisattva vow, and of the importance of merit, of generating merit, and of creating the right causes and conditions. And you can see that in all the life stories. Like, think about, many of you are familiar with Mapa, Milarepa, Gampopa. Like, if you think of the Mapa's life story, when he went to India to receive teachings from Naropa, his guru, the Indian yogi and siddha. He traveled from Tibet to India in very harsh and difficult circumstances, but before he even left on that long, arduous journey, and very, very dangerous journey, where you are, there are bandits, there are difficult, there's hardly any roads, you're traveling maybe on a yak or a horse, tough, it's not like taking an airplane, And before he went on that journey, he spent many months gathering provisions and collecting gold to give to Mapa as an offering. So he collected all these, I don't know how many ounces of gold he collected, but this was something very valuable and very precious and very hard to come by, and he brought that all the way with him to India. He went through great trouble to go and find Naropa, who was somewhere out in the middle of the jungle, in the middle of nowhere. And then when he offered this gold to Naropa, he just tossed it into the jungle. I don't need gold, the whole world is gold to me. So it is not for the benefit of the teachers, it is for our benefit. The teachers don't need the gold, the teacher did not need the gold. And it is that understanding of the importance of merit that is really, like, we can see that in the life stories throughout. When you look, that's also why it's important to read all the life stories of the masters. So merit, we're creating merit, and so it said when we make offerings, they should have these three purities. Pure. The offering itself should be pure substances. We should not give something that's like second best. We keep the best and we'll just give the second best. We keep the nice fruit and we'll put the less nice fruit, offering it to the three jewels. So things like that. Should be very pure. If we think the Buddha would walk through the door today, if the Buddha walked through the door today, then this is what we would offer, the very, very best. If they come up, or His Holiness Dalai Lama, if they arrive, this is what we would offer, the very, very best. So pure substances. So the substances should be pure. The offerings should be pure. The motivation should be pure. Should be a motivation of bodhicitta, selfless, not expecting anything in return. If we have a motivation when we make offerings of wanting something in return, even expecting thanks. If you again remember the Tonglen teachings, one of the slogans in Tonglen says, don't expect thanks. Whatever you do, do it selflessly. Do it as selfless service. Don't do it. So that's the right motivation. Do it to serve others genuinely, not because you are wanting to be recognized or to be seen or to be sort of applauded for it. And then the field of accumulation should be pure. That means that those you're offering to, that's the three jewels, the Buddha, the Dharma and the Sangha. That is what we call the field of accumulation. We make offerings to the Buddha, to the three jewels, Buddha, the Dharma, Sangha. It's not like giving something to a friend. That is much different than offering to the Buddha, because the Buddha is the source of this freedom from suffering. So if you have a shrine at home, that's what you can do. That's what you can do in a very simple way. Have a very simple shrine. And like we do upstairs, we have 7 water bowls that we fill in the morning, and we have more than 7, but you can have 7 water bowls that you fill in the morning and you empty them at night. And so it's said that if you do that, this is like you have a pure offering of. So the offering should be pure. Water is pure, or the water should be clean and pure. Your bowl should be clean and pure. So the substances are pure. That means that you have 7 water bowls. They should be clean, and they should be nicely arranged in a neat row. It's like you do it very mindfully and carefully. Place them on the shrine, and when you fill them, it says that if you fill them with too little, then that develops a mind of like a hungry ghost. Sounds to me a little bit like superstition. Says leads to poverty mind. If you fill them too much, then it's like your discipline is dispersed. So if they overflows, for example, it's like you're losing your discipline. It signifies losing your discipline. Or if you're spilling it all around, it says it creates obstacles. But it's really, the key point here is that we should do it very mindfully and carefully. And they say fill them to, there's a sort of a grain below the rim, a grain size below the rim. So we're offering pure substances in a pure way, and we're offering with a pure motivation of bodhicitta, so that we may reach enlightenment for the benefit of all beings, and we offer them to this field of accumulations, which is the 3 jewels, the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, on the shrine. This is something that all of us can do. You fill it from the left in the morning, left direction, then you empty it from the right in the evening. You wipe the bowls and you place them upside down. This is how you can practice generosity without it, costing you anything. Because, so then if we look at generosity is explained as it's a mental state. It is not about having lots of wealth to be able to offer. It's a mind state. It's all about training our mind. It is not about, now I need to give everything away, and in that way I will perfect this attitude of generosity. It is not a matter of, it doesn't mean that bodhisattvas who have reached this or attained this perfection of generosity, it doesn't mean that they have given everything and that they have satisfied the whole world and the needs of all beings, because they clearly haven't. When we look out in the world, there's still lots of poor people, there's still lots of needy people, there's still lots of suffering, and yes, it's not a matter of how much we give, that much we have, to that degree we have perfected generosity. That's not what the teachings are telling us. It's very much saying that, for one thing, that would be impossible to satisfy the whole world, and another thing is that it's a mind state. It's about training our mind. We are training our own mind, and bodhicitta is a mental state. Generosity is a mental state. So here Shantideva says in some verses here, he says, if the perfection of generosity meant freeing the whole world from poverty, then, since there is still poverty in the world today, how could it have been that the bodhisattvas of the past attained this virtue? So if it means that the bodhisattvas could free the world from poverty, why is there still poverty today? So then he says, it's said that the perfection of generosity is the result of the will to surrender to all beings everything that is yours, including the fruit of such surrender. Therefore, this perfection is a mental act. Because anyway, we know that we always want more. Our mind is insatiable. Our desire is insatiable as long as we are caught in this attachment and aversion. We want one thing and we want another thing and a bigger thing and two of that same thing, three more. So for bodhisattvas, it's that the perfection of generosity depends on overcoming clinging, grasping and clinging. Being able to surrender, give whatever is needed, and destroying ego clinging, and clinging to what we consider as ours, mine. Clinging to a self is part of that. Clinging to my body, my things. How, our body is the basis of our ego clinging. How much we identify with our body, our physical possessions, all the good things in our life, all the merit. There's so many aspects of clinging in our life. So me, mine, my happiness. So it is the perfection of generosity means we've destroyed that clinging, or we have purified that clinging and grasping, because that clinging and grasping is the cause of our lack of contentment and our lack of ease, our lack of peace. Because that is you could say that definition of the desire realm is just lack of contentment and always feeling we have to have something else. Whatever we have is just not enough, even if we have so much. We never have enough. So, of course, we are training, we are not there yet, so we should continue to train. We should give and train in giving, but train in giving purely. And train in all the different ways that there are, such as Tonglen, for example. Practicing Tonglen is very much about giving up ego clinging, but it's a form of generosity where we are imagining we are giving everything. When we dedicate merit is a form of generosity in our practice. But we need to understand it, like it makes a big point about this, that it's not about externals. Generosity is not about externals. We can give and give and give external things, but if our mental clinging is so strong, we need to look inwards and give up that. We need to give up the clinging. That's what we should be offering to all the Buddhas. Here, take all my clinging, I offer it to you. Free me from all that clinging. Transform it into bodhicitta. So our main klesha is lack of contentment and desire. And we need to consider the results, the karma of the causes, the karma and the results of desire and grasping and clinging. We need to recognize that it doesn't really help us very much. Us giving in to clinging and grasping desire continuously, which is what we are encouraged to do, like in the world. I mean, we're talking about subtle ways as well as very intense. It can be very intense, isn't it? Our life can be very intense. If you're in a relationship, let's say maybe there's a relationship breakup, that's a very difficult thing. There's a lot of attachment and clinging, or maybe there's a dependency on substances or something. Like there's very obvious times where we can say there's very strong clinging and grasping and attachment. Then there's other times where there's much more subtle. So we need to look at our mind and see all the subtle aspects as well, and see the consequences of that in our life, and how the results of clinging, grasping, attachment, desire, ego clinging, whatever we call it, which is the opposite of generosity, the results of that on myself, it is I feel unsatisfied, I feel unhappy, I have a poverty mentality, I never really complete, I feel incomplete. That's why we look outside to complete ourselves, and whatever we feel we are lacking, we are trying to take that from outside and fill that hole within ourselves. That's never going to work. So that's the result it has on ourselves. We're very unsatisfied and not content. And the result of it has on others, it's basically, you could say it's the end of relationships. It creates a lot of problems in relationships. If there is a lot of grasping and clinging and wanting, that does not create healthy relationships. So our friendships and our basic day-to-day life is affected by these mind states in a negative way. So we should be aware of the faults and the problems that arise out of that mind state that has no contentment, where we're not content, where we're never really fulfilled, we feel we're always lacking something. And then we should become very mindful and very careful, like it said before. We should become very, very careful and direct our mind and try to not fall down those cracks, and recognize that it's our way of thinking that is wrong, and train ourselves in this generosity, which is the way to transform this, the alchemy that can transform desire, craving, ego clinging into bodhicitta and the perfection of caring for others. So we need to focus on that. So it's like, as always, we should recognize how the faults of the lack of qualities, the faults of those mind states, if we know the results and if we know the benefit of the positive mind states, then we should focus on those. So then, we'll have a break now, and then we'll go on to look more at generosity itself after the break. So we have a break until 4 o'clock, or like half an hour break. So let's do the dedication. Sanam de tamche sepane tomne nyepe danam pamche ne chegana je balav tupaye sepe sole dowa dolwa sho sangcho semcho rinpoche ma che panam je jo chik che pa nyam pa me pa dang kone kondu pelwa sho So that verse is good to memorize. This verse, that's the verse that the text is based on. Those 4 lines. Kaden jemba gone desonte kuson du jing adu sado so let's continue looking at generosity. So it said that there are 3 kinds of giving. 3 types of generosity. Yeah, 3 types of generosity, and usually you talk about giving of material things, giving of protection, and giving of the Dharma. So generosity of material things, generosity of protection, generosity of Dharma. Those are the 3 general categories. And mostly I think we engage in the first one, don't we? When we practice generosity, we practice giving material things. We are not really mostly able to give protection or giving Dharma. It's not the main top prior or top thing of our activities. So we'll look at that so giving. Let's first look at giving material things then, and that's where I was going to read you some verses here. So Shantideva, he says about giving material things. He says, to the Buddhas, those thus gone, and to the sacred Dharma, stainless and supremely rare, and to the Buddha's offspring, oceans of good qualities, that I might gain this precious attitude, I make a perfect offering. I offer every fruit and flower, every kind of healing draught, and all the precious gems the world contains, with all pure waters of refreshment. Every mountain wrought of precious jewels, all sweet and lonely forest groves, the trees of paradise adorned with blossom, trees with branches bowed with perfect fruit, the perfume fragrance of divine and other realms, all incense, wishing trees and trees of gems, all crops that grow without the tiller's care, and every sumptuous object worthy to be offered. So this is some of the verses that Shantideva mentions as examples of giving material things, making offerings of all these, whether they are real or imagined. Like you can hear from the verses that some of these things, as we know it, they don't exist. So he's talking about imagined things. We can make offerings of what we own, we can make offerings of actual things, and we can make offerings of imagined things, such as when we make the offerings of the mandala. If some of you are familiar with the Ngondro practice, the 3rd part of the Ngondro practice is a mandala offering. This is about generation of merit and offering everything that is worthy of offering within the whole universe. You're imagining you're offering, the whole universe, the sun and the moon, all the different planets and stars and everything that's contained in them. So imaginary offerings is fine to use to make offerings as well. And just when we give, we need to focus on the motivation. And one thing that I wanted to remind you about, or to tell you about, is like Akong Rinpoche's example of when he escaped from Tibet. If you know his story, his life story, Akong Rinpoche, who founded Samye Ling, himself and Trungpa Rinpoche, they escaped in 1959. It's now already quite a long time ago. But that escape shaped the rest of his life and ours too, because we connected up those of you here and Samye Dzong, this exists because of Akong Rinpoche, and we are connected up through his life and his activities. And what happened on his escape was such a long and arduous journey that you can read about both in Trungpa Rinpoche's book about his escape, where he describes both Akong Rinpoche and Trungpa Rinpoche and Lama Yeshe Rinpoche's escape, and various books there about it. So I don't remember, was it 9 months? It was like a very, very long journey, traveling at night because they were risking to be caught in the daytime by the Chinese, and in the winter, and the snow mountains in the Himalayas. There were more than 300 people when they started off, more or less, and there were very, very few people who actually managed to make it to India. Many of them got captured. You can also read about it in Lama Yeshe Rinpoche's book, From a Mountain in Tibet. He describes the escape. And the thing that happened on that journey was that they basically came to the end of their capability. They had not reached India yet, and they were still in these really inhospitable mountains where there was nothing to eat, and they were starving. They had spent all their supplies long time ago. No more tsampa, no more barley. They had even boiled some of their leather bags to see if there was any kind of nourishment, juice left in those old leather bags. And they eventually could not walk on any further, and they came to a cave, or sort of a shelter, and they just collapsed in that shelter, and they thought, we're going to die here. And that was during that time when they were in that cave, was when Akong Rinpoche made this vow. And he said, if I survive this, then I will dedicate my life to feed others. I will dedicate my life to give others shelter. Because he had experienced so strongly what it means to have no food and to have no shelter and to be at the end of your life. And he said they had brought so many precious things with them, and as they went on in their journey, they basically had to leave many of them behind because they could not carry them anymore, and all they wanted was food. So they got discovered by some miracle, local person, a local herder. He found them in that cave. He stumbled across them in that cave, and they were, as we know, rescued. They survived. And so eventually, as they came back, came to India, first to India, and then in the early 60s, I think 63, they got a scholarship to study in Oxford, and then in 67 they started Samye Ling. And Rinpoche built a monastery and set all of that up, establishing the Dharma in the West, the first Buddhist monastery in the West. But then he also established Rokpa as a humanitarian branch, you could say, of Rokpa, because Rokpa Trust is a charity of Samye Ling and all the branches, the centers. But the humanitarian aspect is what you say, Rokpa International, and they focus purely on feeding and giving education and giving shelter to those in need, anyone in need, not just Buddhists. They work in Africa, South Africa, Zimbabwe. But while Rinpoche was alive, they worked very much in Tibet. He did so much for one person. What he has accomplished in his life, like how many people he has benefited, it's like we cannot tell, but all the schools he has built, preserving the Tibetan language, giving education to all these young children who were from very poor Tibetan backgrounds, and many of them either orphanages, or they might have one parent, or they might have, some sort of family problems where they were not able to be supported by the family. So he gave them education, he gave food. And in Nepal, the Rockport Food Kitchen, they have been giving food to the beggars there for years and years and years, every winter. This came out, this generosity, this overwhelming generosity of giving the Dharma, of giving protection, of giving material things and needs. This was an expression of his overwhelming commitment and his bodhicitta. He really is an example of a bodhisattva. His activity was purely focused on helping others. And the amount of hardship he went through himself, and the lack of comfort in that process, like when he was traveling in Tibet, it was very tough and very basic. So all of this is an example of all the three types of generosity. His life is an example of the three types of generosity. Giving, millions and millions he spent on generosity of material things, and on giving the Dharma, and giving protection in terms of how to protect people who are in Tibet, who are in very difficult conditions, also in South Africa where there's very difficult conditions, and trying to give them confidence to stand on their own feet and give them tools to stand on their own feet. So I think his example is like an amazing inspiration for all of us that we should use when we look at generosity. This was pure generosity. We have the other examples as well of being able to do that. But it's not like, if we look at our own life, we can strive to do our best. We may not be able to do what he did, but we can strive to use our lives to the best of our ability to be of benefit. But it said we should be wise and realistic in our giving. When we're saying, I'm going to practice generosity, I'm going to help others, we cannot just go and don't go and just empty your bank account and say, here you are, I'm practicing Buddhist, you can have it all. And then you have nothing yourself to survive on, and you end up regretting it, and you end up having to ask for help yourself. And we have to be realistic. We cannot just... we have to know our own boundaries and our own abilities. But there are stories of people who did a similar thing to Akam Rinpoche, and also who gave everything away. Like in Marpa's life story, you will read about how one of his students, he had some of his main students, they were called to Marpa's place for teachings and empowerments. And it says that as offerings for these empowerments and transmissions that they were getting, one of his students, I don't remember which one it was, he brought all his possessions, everything. He brought like a big caravan of stuff with him, except for one goat. So he had one goat, animals was their livelihood, many people in the mountains. So he didn't bring this one goat because it had a broken leg. So he left that one behind. And when he brought all the things to Marpa, he said, yes, very good, but where is your goat? Give me your goat. Go and get me your goat. So he went all the way back, and he brought the goat. He says he brought it on his back. And I suppose as an example of his commitment. And similar, Lama Yeshe Rinpoche, in his life story, he talks about how in his retreat in America, after he became a monk, when he had become a monk with the 16th Karmapa, at one point the Karmapa visited America again, and Lama Yeshe decided to give all his possessions, whatever he had. Like he had some money, he said he had some money in a bank account. He withdrew all his money, sent it all to the Karmapa. He didn't see him because he was in retreat, but he sent it to him and all the precious objects he had. And in retreat, in those kind of retreats, you normally don't have a bed. You have what you call a meditation box. You sit up straight. It's a little bit like something like this in front of you, and then you have sides and you have a back. And you sit within this box. It has like a high back. That's your meditation box with a mattress. And that's where you sit and meditate during the daytime, and you also sleep in it at nighttime. You sit up and you sort of lean over on the side. Anyway, Lama Yeshe actually had a bed in his retreat. So when he sent all his precious things and all his money to the Karmapa said, yes, very good, but where is his bed? Why didn't he give me his bed? So he must have had a very nice bed. We should practice generosity, making offerings, but we should give without pride and without expectations. So that's important. It's not just important to give things away, like it says at the beginning. It is the mindset. So not giving with expectations is very important. If you give a birthday present to somebody, you give a Christmas present, whatever you give, if they decide to do something else with it. Actually, I sometimes get into trouble like that if somebody gives me something, and then sometimes I give it to somebody else. And then sometimes I don't remember who gave it to me. And I have actually given it back to the same person. Yeah, this is this nice thing for you. You can have it. I gave that to you. So I hope that those people did not mind. But that's how we should be. When we give something, we give it to them and it's theirs. They can do with it what they want, right? They can make use of it how they want. If they want to give it to their family, to their children, to their friends, that's fine. If they want to use it, that's fine. If they don't want to use it, it's also fine. That's the giving without expectations. Trying to give without also pride. That's... there are some stories about that, giving with pride or giving with expectation. There's one Zen, sort of a quite well-known little Zen story about a Chinese emperor who asked Bodhidharma, this great master who brought the Buddhism to China. He said to Bodhidharma, the Buddha taught that if you make a lot of offerings, you go to the pure realm. It's sure that you will go to the pure realm. And I have made so many offerings. I'm an emperor. I have a lot of wealth. I have given robes to the Sangha. I have given food to the Sangha. I have built temples. I have had texts printed. So, how much merit have I developed? Will I go to the pure realm? How much merit do I have? So he asked Bodhidharma that, and Bodhidharma just said, none. You have no merit whatsoever. Because you have had so much expectation and so much pride in your giving that there really hasn't been much goodness in it. There's been a lot of wealth given away. There might have been very temporary benefit if you give food to the Sangha and they can feed themselves, but in terms of genuine merit, it is not there because your motivation is tainted, it's poisoned. You're so filled with pride and expectation. And really, what it means, if we give like that, then giving becomes wanting, doesn't it? It becomes the opposite of what we're trying to do. We are trying to develop a mind of sharing, a mind of letting go of our own grasping, a mind that is open and free and without preference. And instead, we're developing more and more wanting of something in return, more and more wanting of recognition, So the generosity in itself is instead based on our own needs and wanting. So we need to be very aware of that. be aware of this motivation and not just think that because we're giving, anyway, just trying to continuously, that's what we're trying to do on the path, is we are just continuously trying to purify more and more our motivation. And of course we are not perfectly pure. That is not a problem as such. The main thing is that we are just aware and we keep refining and do our best. That's always the thing. Just be aware of the pitfalls and do your best. Then also we are taught that we should not practice, of course, wrong generosity. We should not give things that have been obtained through wrong livelihood, things that have been obtained through, I don't know what, like through if you have a job that is basically harming others, if you are working in a place that creates harmful substances or something, or weapons or poison, or if you have made your money through cheating people, stealing, cheating, all these things that I don't think any of you do really, or through coercion, flattering, bribery, hypocrisy, all of those sort of dubious ways of making material goods or a living, they are not suitable for making offerings. They are not pure. The substances are not pure. The things are not pure. It's not right livelihood to give away things. We cannot use them as gifts, of course. Like we can't really, can we? If I go and take your jacket and say, that's an I pinch your jacket and then I say, here you go.
I might get it back eventually.
You might get put your money in your pocket. So this kind of thing, we have to be aware of, again, it's about combining our generosity with wisdom. We should not give something that harms other people either. So meaning, we should not give, practice a generosity that in the end, the result of our generosity means that the person we give to, they get into more difficulty, they get into deeper trouble than they were before. This is an issue that many people are, sort of a conflict many people feel when you have somebody asking you for money in the streets and you think, well, how are they going to spend the money? Are they going to use it on drugs? Are they going to use it on good things or on bad things? Same in India, there are many beggars, and you see that there are many stories of children being used by somebody to make money for them. So again, we need to use wisdom or some sort of intelligence to not give in a way that causes harm. What I think a lot of times people do in India is they give food if there's many beggars. You give things that you need. You know it's not going to be certainly be bad for them. So let's read a few more verses where giving pure items, Shantideva says, lakes and meres adorned with lotuses, delightful with the sweet-voiced cries of water birds, and everything unclaimed and free, extending to the margins of the boundless sky. I hold them all before my mind, and to the mighty sage, the Buddha, the greatest of our kind, and to his heirs I make a perfect offering. Sublime recipients, compassionate lords, think of me with love, accept these gifts of mine. So again, this talks about giving pure items and giving items that don't belong to anyone, like the universe, like I said before, mentally giving imagined things, which is also fine to do that. So then you can also reflect on, so not giving, that's one thing, is not giving things that are harmful or things that are obtained by wrong livelihood. And also then you can reflect on the benefits of generosity. Reflect on the way that by practicing generosity we develop contentment. By caring about others we let go of our own issues, our own sort of inward looking sense of being stuck on our own problems. It develops contentment. We feel secure, we feel confident. It develops confidence. Our fear, insecurity is reduced if we can really develop and train in generosity. It can help us to focus our mind, because certainly if we look at desire and grasping, if we are trying to meditate, that's one of the things that pull us away, is our striving mind, our mind that's all over the place, that is so obsessive about entertainment, or what you call it, like stimulation, I would say, instead of entertainment. Like our mind has this desire to be stimulated, constant stimulation. That's an aspect of desire, an aspect of sort of grasping, lack of contentment. So our mind will be more focused in our meditation. We will develop more clarity, clear mind if we have through practicing generosity, because it will overcome, it is a remedy for this need for constant stimulation, where like we are now so instantly just on the press of a button, there's something else and everything is happening so fast. So we'll have a better ability to settle the mind, because we cannot settle the mind when the mind is always striving for something else, and we will feel fulfilled. So we should think about that as well. We are the ones who are benefiting. It is not really the people we're giving things to or we're caring about. And then we can also use contemplation of impermanence as a remedy for attachment and desire. So thinking, of course we know that impermanence is a big aspect of the teachings, like recognizing impermanence in our life, in every instant of our life, that there's nothing solidly there we can rely on as being permanently, independently existing of its own accord. Everything is changing. Sometimes for the good, sometimes for the worse. It's not that it is in itself, it is not a bad thing, impermanence. It can be a good thing, you know. Sickness comes to an end. Suffering comes to an end. Anxiety, depression comes to an end. Positive things arise. Good things arise. You might get a good job, you might have a good meditation, you might have all sorts of good opportunities. But it's just a fact of life that everything is constantly changing. So in terms of generosity, we need to make use of our current state of mind. We need to make use of our current life, because we of course don't know how long it will last. We need to make the most of it, and certainly in terms of material things, not keep them till it's too late. Just leave them for your will. Why not? If you have children, why not help your children while you can, instead of waiting until... I remember Akam Rinpoche saying that. Why do parents always wait until they're dead to give some material things to their children? Maybe they don't always, maybe some do help them before. But in the West we're very used to this idea of just, until we die, then that doesn't happen. In any case, contemplating impermanence and then recognizing that we cannot take anything with us, and so it's better to use our material things for beneficial purposes for everyone. So then we should also consider the recipients of our generosity, this field of merit, which is of course the three jewels. Here Shantideva says, just as Manju Gosha, Manjushri and the like made offerings to all the conquerors, I do likewise to all the Buddhas, our protectors, and to all their Bodhisattva children. Sort of summarizes who we're offering to, all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. We offer the field of accumulation is like the most precious and most fertile ground possible. It's actually said that when we make offerings, the recipients of our generosity is of three groups. You have the beings of devotion, you have the beings of respect, and you have the beings of compassion. So it's not only the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. So beings of devotion is like the three jewels, all the Bodhisattvas, all those who have great realization, all those who are wise, who are very accomplished. You make offerings to them because for so many reasons of what they accomplished and how they're benefiting others. Then you also make offerings to beings of respect. Beings of respect is our parents, all those who have helped us directly in our life, our teachers. I'm not necessarily Dharma teachers, but all those who have guided us, who've been our mentors, who've been our benefactors in our life. We owe so much to so many people in our life when we look back. This person, I learned this from that person, I learned this from that person. We've learned from others. We haven't just learned it from books alone. Many people have influenced us in so many ways. So beings of respect, we make offerings to them. Our elders and those who have directly helped us in our life in some way. And then the third group is beings in the 6 realms of suffering. Beings are the group of, like we say, of compassion, the field of compassion. So that means all sentient beings of the 6 realms where there is suffering. And that is where those 3 groups are where we direct our generosity. So that's the material things. And you also talk about giving protection from fear, and that I'll go very briefly over that. So protection from fear, in danger, if somebody's in trouble, we can help them, we can advise them, we can do what we can in all the different sort of situations. However those sort of situations play out. Also animals, the animals are part of the 6 realms, so helping animals from danger, from fear. Animals are in great danger. Animals are suffering greatly through fear and being threatened, whether it's from humans or from other animals. So there's a lot we can do in terms of helping animals. Like in Tibet, it was a tradition to save animals from being slaughtered, from being killed. So they would, when you did that, you would buy animals from those places and you would let them free. They would buy goat. Members also did many times this, both lambs and goats and yaks. Even I remember one time he told he had bought chickens, and then you give them, either you let them free, depending on the animal, so you give them to a farmer, and then for 2 or 3 generations they are protected. I mean, they are protected, but then their offspring for 2 or 3 generations are protected, and then after that the farmers can do what they want. It's very beautiful, isn't it? A way of trying to integrate the Dharma in something like making a livelihood where that involves killing. If you're a farmer or in Tibet, living from the land and from the yaks and the goats, etc. This is basically your food. You could not survive without. So giving protection to animals. And then giving, the third type of giving is giving the Dharma. That means actually teaching the Dharma. If somebody does that, giving teachings on text, etc. But also it can mean giving encouragement to people in their practice. Can mean sharing without necessarily teaching. It can mean sharing your own experience of how you benefited from the Dharma, what helped you in terms of, if somebody wants to hear that. Of course, sharing the Dharma has to be to somebody who wants to hear it. You cannot force it on somebody. That has the opposite effect. But if you feel like, again, it's with wisdom, with intelligence, if you use your common sense and you say this, you might say this, you might give that advice based on your own experience, then that is also a form of giving the Dharma. Doing the pujas of dedication for dedicating them to all beings, and special prayers for all beings, and dedicating the lamps for all beings, this sort of thing. This is also the Dharma in some way. And then you can recite mantras for all beings and for animals, and say animals who have died, or if an animal dies, you can recite manis for them. And it said if they hear it, or if these are recited, it's like planting a seed for a future rebirth. You can do this animal liberation that I mentioned in Tibet. It's also done in other countries, not only Tibet, like in Burma, they do it a lot, Thailand, freeing fish, etc. But you have to sort of be careful when you do it and do the right thing. So this covers really generosity, and we're kind of coming to an end as well. So I think for you yourself, in terms like how do I, you have to look in my own life. What am I doing in terms of meritorious action? How much merit, if you want to be like, not being like the Chinese emperor, but again looking at my own life. We should always use the Dharma to reflect back on my own life, because that's what it's about. It's our own personal journey, and we need to use it to improve ourselves, improve our mind. And we need to look at here is how much of my time is used on neutral activity. How much of my time is used on harmful activity, maybe? How much of my time is used on meritorious activity? Now we're looking at generosity. So in terms of generosity, how much of my time do I spend on positive actions like that covers this generosity? Generosity can be like listening to friends and sharing time with friends. It can be also giving of time and kindness in many different ways is part of generosity. But how much of my 24 hours a day is neutral? I think that's a really good thing to look at, because I think we find that we will get surprised of how much it sort of again falls through the cracks. So much time just goes. These last 2 years, didn't they just go very quickly? 2 years of lockdown. What did we accomplish in 2 years? 2 years of my life, what did I accomplish? 1 day of my life, what have I accomplished? Have I changed? Has my mind changed in that period? How can I change? What can I do to change my mind? What can I improve on? This is telling us, like, this is how you should train. Shantideva, but not only Shantideva, all the great masters are telling us through the sixth perfection, this is how we will benefit in terms of our Dharma. And not to think that it is just about sitting on the meditation cushion. It is our whole life needs to be integrated. So it's something very important to look at for each individual. It's something very important to look at, and for you to benefit, you need to look at and say, how can I integrate this into my daily life? What am I doing now, and how can I improve it? Gradually improve it in a sensible, realistic way, wise way, so that all the causes and conditions come together for, Bodhichitta to grow, for my Dharma to come to more and more fruition. Merit. What else would we want to do? We don't want to. Merit means positive karma, you could say. We say causes and conditions come together, results are produced. Results means karma. Now causes and conditions coming together, we want the results and the karma to be positive results. We don't want it to be negative results. We want it to be beneficial results for ourselves and others. So that's why we need to look at it and say, I want to do the best, to the best of my ability. So that's where we end. Do you have any questions? I hope those online are okay so far, and that they're still there. Everybody's still there. Yeah?
If you were to do an act of generosity, should you then say, this is for the benefit of sentient beings to get the most value from that? Or do you not need to say that?
I'm going to repeat your question for the people online. So the question is, if you are being generous and you do something where you're being generous, should you voice the motivation saying this is for the benefit of all beings? You don't have to say it, no. You just have to have that mindset when you're making the motivation. It has to be not just words, it has to be genuine intention. The motivation is our intention. This is why I'm doing it. Because I understand how beneficial and how good and how precious that is. Like these examples we had of these metaphors of the benefit of bodhicitta, the alchemy, the jewel. Those how it transforms. We understand it transforms. So with that understanding, then the intention becomes very real. We don't need to say it, but we have to mean it. I have often thought that because the masters, the great teachers, they're said to be like wish-fulfilling jewels. I feel that I have really experienced that. And the way I've experienced it is that, say, if you ask, I would say, like someone you have really great faith in, or like the Buddha, or like His Holiness Karmapa, I don't want to say like lots and lots of names, but the great teachers who have obvious realization, well, it may not be obvious to everyone, but if you really mean it, it will come true. It will happen. But if in your mind you have this sort of like, half, you're not completely there, it doesn't work. But if you have complete conviction and faith and overwhelming sort of, faith maybe, trust, then it does happen. I think it's this combination of the compassion of the teachers and the faith of the students come together, and that's why they're called wish-fulfilling jewels. This means bodhisattvas. I'm talking about bodhisattvas. Not ordinary, we're not talking about ordinary human beings. We cannot say, I really want your jacket, You might still give me a jacket. But it is something, of course, much more than that. So that was by the way, but you don't have to say it, but you have to really mean it. Kind of from the part of the bone of the marrow of your being. So I think we're going to leave it there. To the dedication, and we continue next Saturday. See if I can find my dedication. Sanam de tam che se pa ne tom ne nye pe danam pam che ne che ga na je ba la tu pa ye se pe so le do wa sho sang cho sem cho rim po che ma che pa nam je jo che che pa nyam pa me pa dang kon ne kon do be wa sho palden lame chapeden padang kanyam yong la de si jong wadang dashen malu so sa dip jane nyodo sanje salagabasho. See you next Saturday.